Behind the terror of Stalin, the warlord, and Nazi concentration camps, a man stood alone, rejected by his father, who ruled millions, abandoned by his father, his nation, and his allies. This is the brutal execution of Stalin's son, and it's hard to stomach. But before we go forward to what happened to him, please subscribe to the channel, where we uncover the horrors of the past. Childhood. Yakov Dzhugashvili was born on the 18th of March, 1907, in a remote Georgian village called Baji. Here, even mountains were wild because they carried the smell of an upcoming revolution. Yakov's mother was 22 when she gave birth, and married a man the world would later know as Joseph Stalin, or the most brutal warlord. However, there was a problem. Kato would never see her son grow up. This is because typhus claimed her life before the year even ended, leaving an infant without a mother and a father figure when he needed it the most.
He says you must stand against Stalin before it is too late. You must help Lenin now.
It's good. Tomorrow.
As Stain found out about his wife's death, he felt nothing but coldness that also defined his relationship with his own son, Yakov. He attended the funeral first, then walked away from his son's life entirely. This left the baby with Kato's relatives in Tbilisi like unwanted baggage. Stain had already chosen the dark path by neglecting his family over revolution. He focused on his ideology over blood. But as his father moved through the shadows of the dark Tsarist Empire with grace while organizing strikes and printing illegal pamphlets, Yakov grew up in complete poverty. He passed between the homes of his relatives, who struggled to feed their own children. Nobody told him that his father was becoming the world's most powerful revolutionary in Russia. The poor child lived as countless other Georgian children did, hungry, uncertain, and unaware that his surname would carry the name of terror at some point in his life. Then, Stalin's arrests, imprisonments, and escapes from the Siberian exile became legendary within the Bolshevik region. But throughout these hardships, he never returned for his son, almost abandoning him. Even after the 1917 revolution that transformed Russia and elevated Stalin's name to one of the most powerful Soviet superpowers, Yakov's name remained abandoned because his father had left him, and he was forgotten in Georgia. But then, things would change for Yakov too. House of Power. Yakov finally arrived in Moscow during the early 1920s. He stepped into a world that felt weird and, to him, eerie. The Kremlin wasn't a home for him, but it was a fortress that was dominated by power games. Weakness means you'll be eliminated quickly with no point of return. At the age of 14, Yakov found himself face to face with the father who had already let him go. Now, his father was a man wielding enormous influence over the new Soviet state. However, even if he was expecting a warm welcome from his father, he was shown literally no warmth. There were no hugs or even simple attempts to rebuild what had been lost. Yakov was going through constant disappointment in his father's eyes, and Stalin had no time for a son who seemed gentle, smart, and intellectually passive. In Stalin's brutal worldview, kindness was nothing but a mere weakness. And according to him, his son was a loser. Then came Stalin's second wife, Nadezhda Alliluyeva, who tried to create some sort of family structure for them. She was young herself, managing a household while raising her children, Vasily and Svetlana. She made genuine efforts to include Yakov and to give him a place at the stable, but her kindness couldn't overcome Stalin's coldness. Inside their household, humiliation became routine. Stalin even publicly mocked his own son whenever he got the chance. He called him useless and weak in front of party officials and family members. What's crazy is that these weren't merely constructive criticisms, but things that were spoken in anger and calculated insults to show the world that even his own son wasn't an exception to his venomous worldview. The boy who had grown up without a father now lived with one who wished he did not exist. That's where Yakov, instead of fighting his powerful father, retreated into himself. He started reading books, became smarter, and even avoided confrontation. His father was so powerful that he would speak little. However, even silence didn't stop him, because the truth was painfully the same every single day. He would never earn his father's respect or find acceptance in his father's cold behavior, no matter how much he wanted to. Character development. By 1928, Yakov was already 21, and there, he needed an escape route because he was being suppressed from all sides. Years of rejections finally caught up with and wounded the poor guy while shattering his sense of self. He understood that he would never transform into the hard and emotionless pit of brutality like his father wanted him to be. So, he started searching for meaning somewhere else and finally found it in Zoya Gunina. Zoya came from a well-educated Jewish family in Moscow. She represented everything that Stalin was against. She wanted a beautiful culture, gentleness, and a genuine emotional connection. With her, Yakov experienced acceptance for the first time in his abandoned life. This is because Zoya didn't care about his famous surname or his father's power. She saw him as just a regular person who was worthy of love. Marriage seemed like their one last chance to redeem themselves, and as a way to get redemption from the world that they were living in. They wanted to build a life separate from the Kremlin's suffocating atmosphere. But that's where things got interesting, because when Yakov informed his father about the marriage, Stalin's response was pure rejection. Stalin was angry, seeing Zoya's Jewish background as politically inconvenient, and refused that his son would proceed with the marriage. He didn't have any discussion nor care about his son's opinions. He commanded that his son should end the relationship. This humiliation wasn't private because Stalin made sure others knew he had blocked the marriage. Yakov then locked himself in a room with a pistol and fired a bullet into his chest. He wanted to kill himself, not gain attention. However, he was saved because the bullet missed his heart but left him badly wounded. During the painful physical and mental recovery, Stalin never visited, almost as if he didn't care. But what happened next is the craziest. And before we get to the next big thing for Yakov, please subscribe to the channel if you want us to keep uncovering painful truths from the past. When Stalin got news about his son, he started mocking him and laughed, making jokes about how his son couldn't even kill himself properly. This response changed something in Yakov, which would change everything for the father and son: becoming a soldier. Despite everything that went on, Yakov found himself getting pulled toward service. In the early 1930s, he joined the Red Army and entered the artillery school. Military structure gave him something he had never had: a clear path and expectation from the people. Here, he wasn't dependent on his father's approval. There, he studied military science seriously, mastered technical aspects of artillery, and even graduated as a junior lieutenant. However, during this time, his surname was interesting to him. Some commanders started giving him preferential treatment, not knowing how to behave around one of the most powerful warlords. However, Yakov never wanted special treatment due to his father. He avoided drawing attention, and even tried to let his work speak for itself. And as the 1930s progressed, and war spread across Europe, with Hitler's rise in Germany making conflict increasingly difficult, Yakov was committed to being a competent artillery officer. On the other hand, his father was still focused on absolute power through terror and purges. The invasion and capture. It was June 22, 1941, that shattered any remaining hopes of normalcy. This is when Operation Barbarossa started, when over 3 million German troops were deployed across the Soviet borders in a combined assault that went from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Wehrmacht's blitzkrieg tactics were some of the most brutal, especially after stormtroopers and other elite forces pushed through. The Luftwaffe bombers were wreaking havoc all through the area, and Soviet defenses started collapsing in a fit of defense and rage. Stalin ignored months of intelligence warnings, and now, the Red Army was unprepared, disorganized, and had no answer for the attack that they were facing. Entire divisions were wiped out, with supply lines destroyed and command structures gone. Soviet soldiers struggled to understand why it was happening. Yakov's artillery unit was near Vitebsk in Belarus, directly in the path of the German advance. Being an officer, he started a firefight against the invading forces, but the situation escalated way too quickly when German air raids destroyed Soviet positions, and Yakov's battalion suffered heavily. Yakov's unit also found itself trapped, and on the 16th of July, 1941, German troops captured Yakov near Smolensk. The exact circumstances are still unclear to this date, and when German officers confirmed his identity, they instantly recognized that the soldier was Stalin's son. According to them, the capture could be weaponized to destroy Soviet morale and even bruise Stalin himself. After the capture, initially, Stalin's son was a prisoner of war camp captive who was near Hammelburg in Bavaria. Here, German intelligence began interrogating him. They pressured him to make a public statement, hating on the Soviet Union and his own father's leadership, while promising better treatment if he complied with them. However, Yakov refused every offer despite having a lot of hatred for his own father. He wouldn't just let go of his country so easily. That's where madness started, because his refusal frustrated his captors, while also making him a much more valuable prisoner. From there, Yakov went to different concentration camps and was finally placed in Zellenbach, the highest security wing, where the most valuable captives were kept.
Listen, Stalin was misled. We were misled.
Really?
So, yes. So the people responsible should be found and punished.
His cell was brutal, containing a concrete box that was barely lit and was freezing cold during the harsh winter months. However, the German campaign failed to produce the widespread manipulation that they hoped for. However, Yakov's capture still became the most useful topic. He also existed in a psychological prison that was more torturous than any physical work. After Stalin learned about his son's capture, he showed a form of complete detachment while showing no concern, anxiety, or even a hint of sadness. He even went as far as to issue Order No. 270 in August 1941, declaring that any Soviet soldier who surrendered was a traitor to their motherland. He abandoned his son once again, and even in 1943, following Germany's defeat at Stalingrad, Soviet forces captured Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, the first German officer of that rank to fall into Soviet hands. Hitler wanted his officer back and even offered Stalin to return Paulus for Yakov, but Stalin refused it all. The final days. Yakov was inside Sachsenhausen-Zellenbau with his body becoming weaker and him going under psychological stress. His skin had no sunlight, and he became pale. He had no way of knowing if someone even cared for him. And as 1942 turned to 1943, turned to 1943, Yakov became emotionally numb. But during the final weeks of his life, something shifted inside the man once again. According to many reports, Yakov started acting differently, and he had a heated confrontation with a guard. The soldiers then started torturing him more and more, and finally, on April 14, 1943, Yakov Dzhugashvili died at Sachsenhausen under unknown circumstances. According to an official Nazi report, he ran toward the electrified perimeter fence and threw himself into it, dying instantly. The truth is nearly impossible to uncover even today, and there's no single version that can be the truth. Even after his death, madness didn't stop because his wife, Yulia, was accused of being an agent and was caught. She was even separated from her young daughter, Galina. Galina also grew up without his parents, and inside the Kremlin, Yakov's name disappeared completely. No medals were awarded, and he was gone. After Stalin died in March 1953, nothing changed. According to Nazi reports, Yakov ended his life behind electric wire. He was a man who was rejected by his father, abandoned by his country, and forgotten in history. Do you think he was killed or ended his life? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. If this story shocked you, subscribe to see more hidden truths from the deepest, darkest corner of the past.